Helen winced as she shifted in her seat at her book club. At 67, she'd grown accustomed to various aches and pains. But this discomfort was different, and not something she felt comfortable discussing, even with her closest friends. For the past year, intimacy with her husband Richard had become increasingly painful. What was once a source of pleasure and connection now filled her with anxiety. She'd been making excuses to avoid sex altogether, and she could sense Richard's confusion and hurt. "Are you staying for coffee, Helen?" asked her friend Diane, a retired nurse in her early 70s. "I'd love to," Helen replied, though the thought of sitting on the hard cafe chairs made her hesitate. As the other book club members dispersed, Diane leaned in. "I hope you don't mind me saying so, but I've noticed you seem uncomfortable lately. Is everything all right?" Something about Diane's professional but caring demeanor broke through Helen's reserve. Over coffee, Helen confided her problem. "I'm so embarrassed to talk about this," Helen admitted. "But sex has become really painful. I've started avoiding it altogether, and it's creating distance between Richard and me. I assumed it was just an unavoidable part of aging." Diane shook her head firmly. "That's a common misconception, but pain during intimacy is not something you should accept as inevitable. I've heard this from so many women, and their partners too. There are usually specific causes, and most importantly, there are solutions." What Diane shared that afternoon changed everything for Helen. First, Diane explained that the pain Helen described, a burning sensation and feeling of dryness, was likely related to vaginal atrophy, a common condition after menopause when estrogen levels decrease. This causes the vaginal tissues to become thinner, drier, and less elastic. But physical changes aren't the only factors, Diane continued. For both men and women over 60, several issues often converge to cause discomfort during intimacy. She outlined the most common causes. For women, vaginal dryness and atrophy due to hormonal changes, pelvic floor changes after childbirth or with age, side effects from medications, particularly certain antidepressants or blood pressure treatments, underlying conditions like arthritis affecting comfortable positioning. For men, erectile dysfunction medications sometimes causing discomfort, prostate conditions or treatments affecting sexual function, joint pain, limiting comfortable positions, cardiovascular issues affecting blood flow and sensation. The problem is that most people don't discuss these issues, even with their doctors, Diane explained. They either suffer in silence or simply stop being intimate altogether. Helen nodded. "That's exactly what I've been doing. I haven't even told my doctor." "You're not alone," Diane assured her. "But here's what you might not realize. These problems are often quite treatable." Over the next week, Helen followed Diane's advice. First, she made an appointment with her doctor, specifically requesting time to discuss sexual health. Despite her initial embarrassment, Helen found her doctor to be matter-of-fact and helpful. The doctor confirmed vaginal atrophy was the likely cause and suggested several approaches, including over-the-counter lubricants and moisturizers specifically designed for vaginal health, low-dose local estrogen therapy in cream form, pelvic floor physical therapy exercises, adjusting the timing of her blood pressure medication. But perhaps the most difficult part of Diane's advice was the conversation Helen needed to have with Richard. One evening, after dinner, she broached the subject. "I've been avoiding intimacy because it's been painful," she admitted. "It has nothing to do with my feelings for you." Richard looked relieved. "I thought you'd lost interest in me," he confessed. "I've been worried about bringing it up." "It seems we've both been suffering in silence," Helen said. "But I've learned there are things we can do." Together, they began making changes. They used lubricants generously. They explored different positions that put less pressure on Helen's hips and Richard's troublesome knee. They expanded their definition of intimacy beyond intercourse, finding new ways to maintain physical closeness. And most importantly, they kept talking about what felt good and what didn't. 3 months later, Helen and Diane met for coffee again. "You look different," Diane observed. "More relaxed." Helen smiled. "Things are much better." It wasn't one solution, but a combination of medical help, open communication, and adjusting our expectations. The intimacy is back, even if it looks a little different than before. "That's what I wish more people understood," Diane said. "Pain during sex after 60 is common, but accepting it as inevitable is the mistake. Usually it's a solvable problem." "The hardest part was breaking the silence," Helen reflected. "Once I did that, solutions followed. For anyone experiencing pain during intimacy after 60, consider Helen's journey. 1. Recognize that pain is not a normal part of aging that you must accept. 2. Consult healthcare providers about specific causes and solutions. Be direct about your concerns. 3. Consider whether medications might be contributing to the problem. 4. Explore products designed specifically for sexual health in older adults. Lubricants, moisturizers, and cushioning pillows can make a significant difference. 5. Communicate openly with your partner about discomfort and work together on solutions. 6. Expand your definition of intimacy beyond practices that cause pain. 7. Be patient with the process. Finding the right combination of solutions may take time. Pain may be common, but suffering in silence doesn't have to be part of your story. With the right information, medical care, and communication, many couples return to comfortable, satisfying intimacy well into their 70s, 80s, and beyond. The key is breaking the silence and taking that first step towards solutions.